Welcome to One on One, the Daily Items weekly digital program featuring Susquehanna Valley newsmakers interviewed by Daily Item reporters. Today's guest is co-founder of the group Susquehanna Valley Progress, Nicole Faraguna, interviewed by reporter Rick Dandes.
Sunbury Motors is bringing in the new year with a lofty goal. Sell 1,000 new Fords in 2019. You heard right, 1,000 new Fords. SMC knows they can achieve this lofty goal, and here's why. Sunbury Motors Ford has 2019 Ford Fiestas starting at $12,820. That's a new car for under $13,000. Browse Central Pennsylvania's largest selection of four-wheel drive vehicles. Pick from 68 Ford Escapes, and they're slashed to as low as $17,820. SMC has all remaining 2018 Ford Explorers reduced by $8,000, starting at $33,985.
Welcome to One on One. I'm Rick Dandes, and today we're speaking with Nicole Faraguna, co-founder of Susquehanna Valley Progress.
That's correct.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I wanted to start by maybe telling people that some people might think that this was different from a group called Susquehanna Valley Progressives. So you've changed your name. Any reason you did that?
Well, I think it was more of a strategic process. One, we recently became a 501c3 organization. And so Susquehanna Valley Progress just is easier to remember, just seems to be kind of more concise. It also defines a little bit more of what we're doing. We're talking about progress for the community. It's not about individuals, it's really about issues. Mm-hmm. We're, like I mentioned, we're nonpartisan, so we're really trying to kind of elevate the issues that are important to people in this community. And we do that a lot through education and advocacy.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question. Do you see yourself as an educative group or an advocacy group or both?
Absolutely both, and they really are intertwined. So a lot of the work that we do is one, educating the public on issues, and we've done a number of different types of programs. We have a forward-thinking column in the Daily Item every other Sunday, mm-hmm. Educating our advocates on how to advocate, what to advocate. And then advocating is, of course, is partly education. So it's really talking to policymakers, legislators, and helping them to understand where our priorities are and what we want them to do.
Let's take a step back for a minute. How did you start this, and how long has the group been around?
Sure. So we can go way back. So
what was your thinking about that?
Well, so before there was Susquehanna Valley Progress, I was actually very involved in a group called Brush Valley Preservation Association. So when I moved back, I lived in D.C. for about 6 years, and mm-hmm. I moved back to Pennsylvania. My then boyfriend, now husband, and I got involved in a debate, a heated debate over whether or not to build a prison on a pristine watershed. And that was the year where I became officially, I guess, an advocate. Mm-hmm. And so became very involved in a variety of different groups, including the Sierra Club. So I've been a local volunteer and member of the Otson group of the Sierra Club. Try saying that 3 times fast. And
I wouldn't even take it.
And so really became very passionate about land conservation, land protection. That's where I work. I work, in a conservation organization in Harrisburg, and really spend my days focusing on land and water protection. Mm-hmm. And so these were issues that kind of were very innate to me. And I come from a very blue-collar background, my family, mm-hmm. Growing up in Shamokin Coal Township. So the idea, my philosophies were really kind of built around the experiences I had growing up, and those kind of days in advocacy, and also the work that I do now. And Susquehanna Valley Progress started out as really this kind of informal meeting.
I remember when you started.
Yeah.
It was 3-4 years ago?
2014 was our kind of official start. And so
very small.
It was very small. So prior to that, it was, John, my husband, and I calling up a variety of different kind of forward-thinking folks that we knew in the community from our various affiliations with organizations, from Sierra Club to the ACLU, and saying, hey, let's have a dinner. Let's just go out to eat and have some really good discussions. Let's have some good conversation.
Yeah.
Because we live in a very conservative area, and sometimes we feel like we might be alone. And so from that, which we're really engaging and entertaining, came this idea that it could be more. And so we held kind of a facilitated discussion and invited whoever wanted to come to share their ideas and what they thought, a Susquehanna Valley Progress could be. And really it came down to three kind of primary objectives for the organization. And that was, one, giving a voice to those who feel voiceless oftentimes. Two, educating and advocating on behalf of the issues that are important to us. And three, offering really important networking opportunities so that people can connect and know that there's other organizations out there doing great work. I mean, we're not alone. There's so many great individuals, great organizations working in this area, supporting good progressive ideas and values. And so
I have noticed that you, at your meetings, you do bring together people from all these different groups. It's quite interesting. And I have noticed also how you've grown. I know that since I have observed and written about some of your earliest meetings, now your meetings do attract a fair number of people. It must be somewhat gratifying.
Absolutely, and I think it obviously depends on the issue. We have delved into a number of important topics that I think are really relevant to the community here, and this isn't. These are issues that we try to take approaches that, again, are not partisan, but are focused on really diving in and helping people to understand what's happening and the impacts on them. And so, for example, healthcare, we've had probably our most widely attended event on healthcare, and it was, in fact, back in 2017 when you had the U.S. Congress, the House, looking to repeal portions of the Affordable Care Act, and it was that very week that we held this event that brought out 180 people on a cold March day to hear from policy wonks, etc. On healthcare. But it was very gratifying because it makes me, one, understand that people do honestly want to learn more. They want to make informed decisions. And we have such great expertise. I mean, that event in particular, we had the CEO of Evan Hospital, we had a physician from Geisinger. So very well-rounded. You were there.
Yeah, Front Street Station.
That's correct, yeah. So it was a very well-rounded panel and gave a lot of opportunity for folks to ask questions. So that's kind of the platform. And just to kind of reinforce our bipartisan or nonpartisan approach, one of our first events was on medical marijuana, and this was one that was really important to me because I have friends who either have benefited or their children have benefited from the legalization of medical marijuana, and we had tremendously wonderful panel. But we invited Senator Fulmer, who was a Republican from Lebanon County, state senator, and we could have invited a number of Democrats, but Mike Fulmer was particularly important because, one, he had kind of evolved on the issue. From talking to advocates, he was staunchly against, and then from learning, looking at the science, looking at the stories, looking at a variety of aspects of medical marijuana, he became a staunch advocate and co-sponsor of this bill that, of course, became law.
I think one thing that we want to make clear to folks who are watching this, and maybe it's a misperception, you are not a far lefty kind of group. You, as you said, you're nonpartisan in education. I think that some people, just the word progressives, saying, you're a far left Democrat group.
Well, honestly, I mean, the word radical is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, you can call someone a radical because they're a little bit left or right of you. We are progressive in that, to me, progressive is promoting ideas and values that support society as a whole, right? So that's why healthcare is such an important issue to us,
Everybody
because
cares.
it impacts everyone.
Everyone, yeah.
Right? And having access to affordable quality healthcare really
Yeah.
impacts the quality of your life in so many ways. So the the idea of far left or far right, I'm not looking to be in the center. I'm looking to provide a position on issues that appear or in my estimation are right for the vast majority of people in the community. So when we're talking about affordable health care, we're talking about promoting good education, environment, protecting our environment so that people can breathe clean air and drink clean water. These are things that support everyone, benefit everyone for the most part, right?
Okay.
So that's
Okay,
where I
that's
come
great.
from.
We're going to pause for a minute.
Sure.
We are speaking with Nicole Faraguna, and we'll be right back.
Sunbury Motors is bringing in the new year with a lofty goal. Sell 1,000 new Fords in 2019. You heard right, 1,000 new Fords. SMC knows they can achieve this lofty goal, and here's why. Sunbury Motors Ford has 2019 Ford Fiestas starting at $12,820. That's a new car for under 13 grand. Browse Central Pennsylvania's largest selection of four-wheel drive vehicles. Pick from 68 Ford Escapes, and they're slashed to as low as $17,820. SMC has all remaining 2018 Ford Explorers reduced by $8 grand, starting at $33,985.
We're back with Nicole Faraguna of Susquehanna Valley Progress. Nicole, we were talking about some of the things you've done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about some of the things you're doing now and in the future. Sure. I know even that you're having a meeting this week.
That's right.
If I could again ask you about Fair District, I know you're somehow involved with the Fair District movement.
Yes.
What's the connection between that and Susquehanna Valley Progress?
Well, through Susquehanna Valley Progress, we actually held a meeting in 2014 or 2015. Brought Barry Kaufman, who was the executive director of Common Cause, which had helped launch the Fair Districts Initiative in Pennsylvania. And he did this really amazing presentation on what is happening in terms of gerrymandering and how Pennsylvania in particular has been impacted. And that drew a lot of interest, and so I had initiated someone from Fair Districts to come and kind of help facilitate and moderate a discussion so that we could determine whether it made sense for local activists to get involved, and in fact it did.
Yeah.
And so we were we had a group that was meeting quite frequently every month, and the idea was to educate local officials on the impacts or consequences of gerrymandering, including school districts, and then also educate legislators. I was really happy that we were able to get Northumberland County to pass a resolution in support of the Fair Districts. And what it is really establishing a nonpartisan, independent commission that does the drawing of the lines. Mm-hmm. Because right now we have politicians determining who their voters are. Right. And it's completely backwards, right? And so something needs to happen. Unfortunately, last year, the end of July was our window for passing legislation because it requires a constitutional amendment, which requires legislation being passed in 2 consecutive legislative sessions. It's not doesn't mean game over. It just means that we wouldn't get something passed in time for the redistricting that will happen in 2021. Yeah. So we're very supportive of redistricting, as well as a number of different types of governmental reforms, from how we operate our primaries to voting access. There's so many things that we could do to improve our democracy, and that could be a whole show.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about some of the things you have upcoming. And people should know that you have regular meetings monthly, is it?
We have meetings. This year we're trying something differently. So we're because after Susquehanna Valley Progress kind of came online, there was a lot of interest from local regional groups. So we saw a lot of local regional progressive groups pop up, which was fantastic. Yeah. So you have, like Coming County Progressives. You have West End Progressives, which is outside of Lewisburg. You have Columbia County. And so you have this great grassroots network operating. So Susquehanna Valley Progress now is meeting every other week because we don't want to, add fatigue to people who are already doing such great work. And the idea is that we want to focus on a single issue in each meeting, really provide a good primer on what's happening with that issue, educate folks, and then talk about action. What are we going to do as activists or advocates to make a difference? So in February, this is being released today on Thursday,
Right.
which means that the meeting would be tonight if you're watching it today, February 17th, and we have our meetings at the Beaver Valley Memorial Church in Lewisburg, on 3rd Street, and starting at 6:30, and they're usually about an hour and a half. And we've invited Dwayne Heisler, who is actually on our board, who also works for SEIU, and he's going to give us the kind of big picture on what's happening in healthcare. There's so many things that could potentially change in regards to healthcare this year, whether it's legislatively, whether it's through the courts, and so understanding the layout, the landscape of healthcare, but then also deciding what we can do to make a difference. So that's going to be our first meeting of January.
Yeah, healthcare is just such an important issue. When we do surveys in the paper about things that are important to people, it inevitably is way at the top.
Absolutely, and we all have the potential of most of us have pre-existing conditions. And one of the things that is really frightening right now is this court case coming out of Texas,
That's right.
where you have really some devastating implications, right? Some are saying, well, this is a really flawed decision and it's going to be overturned, though it could still go to the Supreme Court.
Right.
But, if you want to look at it pessimistically, you can really see the implications on what it would have for providing health care to those with pre-existing conditions. And a lot of people with employer-provided health care say, I don't care what happens to the Affordable Care Act, I'm covered. Well, the consequences here means that those of you with pre-existing conditions, even if you're with an employer-backed program or plan, your coverage is in jeopardy because there's potential widespreading consequences. So, healthcare, there are so many aspects to the Affordable Care Act. Just the recent decision by the Trump administration to eliminate the individual mandate means costs are likely going to rise because you no longer have that incentive for young people to get into the marketplace and drive those costs down. So there's just so many moving parts, and so it's important for us to stay educated and stay active.
Yeah. One thing that interests me about you and your group is this is such a conservative area in terms of political voting. And you had a good slate of candidates in the recent election. There was a blue wave around the country,
Sure.
but it never reached the banks of the Susquehanna.
That's right.
Is that somehow frustrating or is it motivating?
Well, I think it's just reality, right? And the fact that we had some really exceptional candidates, and I think that even going in, when you look at the numbers when it comes to the makeup of the legislative districts in our area, I give folks so much credit for getting into those races because they're really uphill battles. But the upside of getting in those races is that you get to help determine what issues are being discussed. So, healthcare, for example, women's rights, equality. These were all issues that were elevated in these races, and so, at the very least, if you're not going to win, you're going to be able to educate voters on some of the issues that are at least that they should be thinking about. And statewide elections turned out really well in my mind, in that, I can't imagine what a Governor Wagner would have looked like, but some of his comments were really very concerning, I think. And to the Republicans' credit, the voters, they recognized that as well, and they rejected his angry notions and his comments that really oftentimes didn't make sense.
Yeah. But certainly the topics that you cover are bipartisan, as we said.
Absolutely. I mean, medical
healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. Healthcare, medical marijuana, government reform. These are issues that, fair districts, we had a really strong collaborative effort among libertarians, a variety of independents, Democrats, and we had a Republican-controlled county board, Northumberland County, that supported the resolution. So that has been, an effort in our eyes to really try to transcend political party, so that we can bring these issues to the forefront. We did a great program on the opiate crisis in Sunbury. Last year, we did a really great program on the Medicare and Medicaid, and what do these services provide? What are the potential threats? So people understand there's so much confusion around Medicare and Medicaid alone.
Yeah.
And now we're talking, we hear rumbles in Congress about potential cuts because, the Republicans are trying to figure out ways to pay for their $1 trillion tax cut. That really hasn't done a lot of benefit to the average person, and to hold hostage programs that do support the middle class are things that we're
We'll be watching as things progress, so to speak. Thank you, Nicole, for being here. And join us again next week for another edition of One-on-One.
Thanks for watching One-on-One. Be sure to tune in next week for another edition.